So this is your week 4 canine muscles. So the first muscle we got is the serratus ventralis. This is made up of the cervical and thoracic portion. The origin comes from the transverse processes of the cervical vertebrae 2 to 7 and the ribs 1 to 7, which is the thoracic part. It inserts on the facies serrata of the scapula, so this is on the medial side of the scapula, and it's identified by the little red dot on the scapula, and this is where the serrated face would be found. Action, obviously, it's one of the most important muscles that's supporting the trunk. You can see where, obviously, it's located around the thoracic region and near the shoulder blade. Obviously, that's going to be very important for supporting those trunk muscles. It helps to elevate the neck as well, because if you look at the way it fans in off the vertebrae onto the scapula, you can see that obviously if that tenses, it's going to help with obviously raising the neck. And it's innervated by the ventral branches of the cervical nerve, which is the cervical part, and the long thoracic nerve, which is the thoracic part of the muscle. So you can see there in the middle image as well, so this is the thoracic portion that is fanning in up off the ribs and in onto the medial facies serrata of the scapula. So what I've done with these images here is on the far left image, what I'm trying to show you here is the structures that are lying over the top of it. So the muscle that's most cranial is going to be your sternocephalicus. Then the one going slightly oblique is your omotransversarius, and then you can see there is a portion there, the whole muscle of the trapezius is lying over the serrated ventralis. So you can see that this is a very, very deep muscle. And where your serratus fans down onto the ribs, you can see there's another muscle coming here off the sternum that's fanning into the serratus ventralis, and this is the deep pectoral at this region here. So Lauren is going to palpate this muscle for us. So first of all, she's locating where her C2 is, and then going down the vertebrae. And then indicating that it's going to be in on that medial side of that serrated face. Then she's counting back on the ribs 1 to 7. And then she's just checking that she's up and in front of her anticlinal, which is about T9, T10. So she's cranial to that. Then she's showing where the muscle fans in. So where it fans in, she's got right that way. Fans into the medial side of the scapula. So she's just indicating that obviously it's a deep muscle. So if we were to palpate it in fibre direction, we'd be going against the coat transversely. So we're going in at quite an oblique angle to palpate in fibre. Then we'd have to go even more of an oblique angle against the muscle fibres to go cross-sectional, so cross fibre. And then with the neck, it's obviously fanning inwards. So to go in fibre direction, we're going to go that way. And then cross fibre that way. So that's your serratus muscle. Okay, so the next muscle is the tensor fasciae antebrachii. So it says it comes from the caudal margin of the scapula with the latissimus dorsi muscle. So the actual origin of this muscle is actually coming from another muscle. So the latissimus dorsi is coming in and then inserting onto teres major. So you can see that on that humeral bone there. So it's coming from the caudal edge of the scapula and down and in. But from the latissimus dorsi, the tensor fasciae antebrachii fans off of it. So its origin is from the caudal margin of the scapula and the latissimus dorsi muscle. And then the insertion is down onto the olecranon and the antebrachial fascia. So with the olecranon, obviously we know that's the most caudal part of the elbow, so the bony bit at the back, and the antebrachial fascia is going to be the fascia that's running down kind of the back of the humerus. The action is to extend the elbow, so that makes sense. If you pull on the back of the olecranon, that's going to open the elbow joint up, and it's going to tense the fascia in this region as well. And the innervation is the radial nerve. So the right hand image, I just wanted you to think about how this sits in relation to your other muscles. So because obviously teres major inserts onto the teres major tuberosity, that's going to insert on the same insertion point as the latissimus dorsi, but you can see that the latissimus dorsi sits underneath where the teres major is. Obviously this is a medial image. Then you've got your subscapularis, these two middle muscles here, and then supraspinatus would be down the front there. And then the muscle that's been chopped away would be a portion of your serratus ventralis. And then when we come down more distal on the muscle, you can see on this medial side that obviously the tensor fasciae antebrachii is fanning down off of that latissimus dorsi muscle. Then the muscle slightly cranial in front of that is your lateral head of your triceps poking through. And then we've got the biceps brachii running down the front. So this would be a left leg from the medial aspect because your supraspinatus is running down the front. So obviously Lauren's going to palpate this for us now. So it's coming off that caudal edge of the scapula with the latissimus dorsi muscle. And then it's coming down and then inserting onto the olecranon and the antebrachial fascia in that region. So to palpate in fibre, we're going to go down the muscle. We're just going to outline it first. So it's that triangular muscle, and then we're going to palpate down onto the olecranon, and then we're going to go cross fibre. So the next muscle is your triceps. So it has 4 heads, which doesn't really make sense because tri normally means 3, but we have 4 heads of the triceps. So we have the long, lateral, medial and accessory. So what I want you to do is to look at the diagram on the left-hand side of the lateral view, so how we see it from the lateral aspect of the animal. So your long head is the one that comes off the caudal margin of the scapula and then inserts down onto the olecranon. Then you've got your lateral ones. The clue is kind of in the insertion here on the proximal lateral surface of the humerus. So you can see that it's attaching on this lateral aspect of the humerus, just a bit below your greater tubercle, your head of your humerus. And it's coming across like a diagonal down onto the olecranon. And then we've got the medial head, which is coming from the medial aspect of the humerus and inserting down onto the olecranon. So you need to look at the right-hand image for that one. So you can see it's coming off the caudal portion of the head of the humerus, and then it's coming medially on the inside and then inserting onto the olecranon. And then we have the accessory head. So this comes from the caudal neck of the humerus as well. And then it's coming out and then down onto the olecranon. So it's not as medial as your medial head. And then if you look on the medial aspect of it all, you can see how they're kind of like lying relative to each other. So your medial head is very medial. Your accessory head is coming off that caudal head humerus, but it's running laterally and then down onto the olecranon. And then you can see how the long head overlaps over the top. But if you look at the left-hand image, you can see how they sort of form relative to each other. They all extend the elbow, but the long head specifically flexes the shoulder, so that's very key, and that's to do with the fact that it becomes originates a lot higher up on the scapula, whereas the other heads don't originate up that high. So what happens with this one is because it's coming off the scapula, it's able to contract and obviously flex that shoulder, and the innervation is the radial nerve. So Lauren's going to now palpate all the heads of the triceps. So the first one that she's starting with here is the long head of triceps. So she's going down in fibre and then cross fibre. So coming off that caudal margin of the scapula. And then we've got the proximal lateral head, so she's finding where the front of the humerus is. and then just coming a little bit further back and then showing where it be coming on across. So from that lateral aspect down onto the olecranon. So that's our in fibre, and then cross fibre. And then our medial head, so Lauren's indicating it's going to be on the medial aspect, just behind the caudal, so on the medial humerus, and then coming down onto the olecranon. So she's just palpating in fibre there, and then cross fibre, but obviously just indicate that'll be on the medial side. And then we've got our accessory head, which again is coming from that caudal neck of humerus, so the back of the humeral head, and then running down onto the olecranon. But obviously this one runs more laterally. So she's outlining where it is and then palpating in fibre. So the next muscle that we've got on your list is the biceps brachii. So this comes from the supraglenoid tubercle of the humerus. So as we said in class, you need to find where your acromion is, and then you need to jump forwards and slightly down to find your supraglenoid tubercle, and obviously if you jump down further, it'll be the greater tubercle of your humerus. So this is the supraglenoid tubercle of the humerus. Then it inserts on the radial tuberosity and the proximal ulna, proximal medial ulna. So your radial tuberosity is identified in the middle image by the red dot. So it's a little bit further down on your on your radius. So that's where your radial tuberosity is. But your proximal medial ulna is basically where the radius and the ulna fuse together. So it's kind of like down this sort of segmented line here is where it will insert, and it inserts medially as well. The action is to flex the elbow, and it's innervated by the musculocutaneous nerve. So in the right hand image, I've just laid up where the other muscles would lie with this one. So it does originate on the lateral aspect, but then does run in and then insert finally on the medial aspect. So I just wanted to show you from the medial side what this would look like. So your deep pectoral has been removed. You can see where your tensor fasciae antebrachii is, and then your medial head of your triceps. But you can see that the biceps brachii is coming from higher up on the lateral aspect, but then is coming down the cranial aspect of the humerus, but ultimately inserting onto the medial aspect on that sort of proximal medial part of the ulna and that radial tuberosity. So on this slide, what I've done is then shown it from the cranial aspect. So again, so you can see where the other muscles are running in relation, but how it starts, obviously on the supraglenoid tubercle. And then obviously you get your biceps tendon crossing the tendinous portion of this muscle across the shoulder joint. So it's coming down, and then it runs cranial, and then you can start to see that it just twists in ever so slightly and then innervates and inserts onto that medial side where that radial tuberosity is and the ulna. So you can see where your other muscles run in comparison to this. So your brachialis comes more caudal and then wraps round and in. And then you've got obviously one of the heads of your triceps down the medial aspect here, and your subscapularis and your supraspinatus, which is running down the most cranial point. And then you can see a portion of the deltoid there that's coming off of the acromion. So Lauren's going to palpate this one for us. So she's finding her scapula and then finding her supraglenoid tubercle. So palpating that and then showing that it's running down the front and then coming in medially. So just showing that it's on that proximal ulna. So we're going to go down the front, across the front of the shoulder, and then wrapping in. So coming down and then wrapping in medially. So that'll be our in fibre palpation. And then cross fibre palpation. So the next slide that we've got, the next muscle is the latissimus dorsi. So this is coming from the thoracolumbar fascia. So if you have a look in the left-hand image, you can see how long this thoracolumbar fascia is. So that's where basically the whole portion of the lumbar region in the dog is where the muscle is originating from. And then it's fanning obliquely and then inserting onto the teres major tuberosity, which is the bony prominence on the medial aspect of the humerus. Its function is to retract the limb, flex the shoulder, and when the limb is fixed, it draws the trunk forwards, and is innervated by the thoracodorsal nerve. So if we just think about, like what we said earlier on about tensor fasciae antebrachii, the latissimus dorsi runs in and then it fuses with the tensor fasciae antebrachii as it's coming across and inserts onto teres major. So the palpation for this muscle, so we're going to take you through this. So obviously we're going to be coming from the thoracolumbar fascia first of all. So Lauren's just showing you where that runs in the dog, which is obviously all the way along the spine. And then it's going down into the teres major, which is medial on the humerus. And then she's tracing the outline of the muscle, which is the triangular shaped muscle. And then it's coming in and inserting down onto teres major. So this would be our in-fibre palpation. And then our cross-fibre palpation. And that's the end of your week 4 muscles.